This morning, Kathy's going to talk about the Article 2 Study Commission, and she'll fill you in on what that is all about. But as I mentioned last week, we are sort of in a historic period of time in Unitarian Universalism. And so what I'm going to do is the reading was actually when the study group was commissioned. These are some of the words that were used. The actual text is longer. I meant to bring a printed copy. I forgot. Sorry about that. But I think you'll see what a tall order it is as I read these words and what's kind of expected of the outcome. The Article 2 Study Commission is hereby charged to review Article 2 of the UU bylaws and propose any revisions that will enable our UUA, our member congregations, and our covenanted communities to be relevant and a powerful force for spiritual and moral growth, healing, and justice. Proposed changes should articulate core UU theological values. The board believes that one core theological value shared widely among UUs is love. The Commission on Appraisal and its report, Engaging Our Theological Diversity, cites Robert Miller's study of Unitarian Universalism, stating, UUs ranked loving as an instrumental value and mature love as a terminal value more highly than did respondents from other groups, religious and non-religious. Dr. Cornell West says that justice is what love looks like in public. Our commitment to personal, institutional, and cultural change rooted in anti-oppression, anti-racism, and multiculturalism, values and practices is love in action, and we should be centered in any revision of Article 2. The new principles and purposes, that's what they're looking at, are the principles and purposes, should guide us in the transformation of ourselves, our communities, and our faith into active networks of collective care, restoration, and justice. The principles and purposes you will prepare should be a living document that challenges Unitarian Universalists to place the liberation in all its dimensions of all at the center of our lives. They should be honest about our past, name what we are facing and our aspirations and where we hope to be, not just for today, but looking out at the horizons. They should ask us to choose love in action as a path forward. Our commitment to anti-racism, anti-oppression, and multiculturalism is love in action and should be centered in any revision of Article 2. Finally, the principles and purposes should lead us into the second quarter of the 21st century while honoring the historic roots of our liberal progressive faith. We therefore challenge this commission to root its work in love as a principal guide in its work, attending particularly to the ways that we and our root traditions have understood and articulated love and how we have acted out of love. The commission is charged with reviewing all sections of Article 2 and is free to revise, replace, or restructure them as needed to meet the objectives stated above. There is nothing sacred about the number of principles or sources, nor the specific wording, nor in the way the Article 2 is laid out. We encourage creativity. The board would like to see an Article 2 that is inspirational, memorable, and poetic. Not too tall of an order there, is it? The language should be inclusive and welcoming and explicitly anti-racist. Article 2, it must be remembered, are our broad statements of principle and purpose, not detailed programmatic or implementation plans.
It's challenging to wear a mask and hearing aids. They always get tangled up. So if I had titled this talk, Revising Article 2 of the UUA bylaws, my guess is that all of you would have decided to stay home in bed. So we tried to be a little provocative with the title. If you grew up Roman Catholic, Episcopalian, Lutheran, Methodist, Presbyterian, or one of the many other Christian denominations, you likely recited the Nicene Creed every Sunday. The Nicene Creed was adopted in 325 of the Common Era at the Council of Nicaea. It is a statement of Trinitarian Christianity, asserting the belief that God is three persons in one, the Father, the Son, and the Holy Spirit. With slight tweaks in the language, the substance of the creed has not been changed in nearly 1,700 years. At baptism, godparents promise that the child will learn this creed. At confirmation, the child affirms their belief in the creed. And according to my Episcopal Book of Common Prayer, the Nicene Creed, quote, ought thoroughly to be received and believed. End of discussion. In contrast, Unitarian Universalists have no creed. There is no belief statement that is required to be a member of a UU congregation. To the contrary, Article 2 of our bylaws of the Unitarian Universalist Association of Congregations, the UUA, contains a freedom of belief clause, which states, nothing in these bylaws shall be deemed to infringe upon the individual freedom of belief which is inherent in the Universalist and Unitarian heritages, or to conflict with any statement of purpose, covenant, or bond of union used by any congregation unless such is used as a creedal test. The freedom of belief clause affirms the freedom of individual congregations to set their mission and covenant statements while clearly protecting the freedom of belief of the individual. It must be said that freedom of belief does not mean the freedom to engage in harmful behaviors. Balancing freedom from creeds and behaving within a covenant, though, is a topic for another Sunday. Rather than being bound by a fixed and unchangeable creed handed down by a higher authority, the member congregations of our UUA are bound together by a covenant, a set of promises that they enter into freely. Our covenant, unlike the Nicene Creed, is not dictated to us, but is created by us through a democratic process. This covenant, contained in Article 2 of our bylaws, expresses our gratitude for religious pluralism and commits member congregations to affirm and promote our 7 principles, and it cites 6 sources as the basis for our living tradition. Although one often hears UU say that we believe in the principles, they are not a creed. Instead, they are values which our congregations have agreed will guide their work. Unitarian Universalists understand that revelation is not sealed and that our agreements need to be re-examined regularly and updated to meet the needs of the changing times. In fact, our bylaws require the reassessment of Article 2 at least every 15 years. By scheduling a review of Article 2, our UUA can keep the core of our faith vibrant and relevant. In addition to the principles, sources, and freedom of belief clauses, Article 2 also includes a statement of the purpose of the UUA, and it includes a statement of inclusion. The UUA's very purpose is determined not by its elected board or its elected president, but by representatives of the member congregations. The purpose clause is critical in that it will guide the UUA's priorities until the next time the language is revised. The Article 2 Study Commission is working to create a new purpose clause which meets its charge to inspire the transformation of ourselves, our communities, and our faith into active networks of collective care, restoration, and justice. Our inclusion clause commits us to remove systemic barriers which exclude people and groups with marginalized identities and to structure our congregational and associational life in ways that empower and enhance everyone's participation. While the language in the inclusion clause might be updated, it is not likely to change substantially. We have been expanding our understanding of who is welcome and how to be welcoming ever since the founding of the UUA in 1961. Article 2 is so central to our UUA that the process for amending it is rigorous. Amendments to Article 2 must go through a two-step process. In the current case, the Article 2 Study Commission will report its recommendations to the UUA Board in January of 2023 and to the General Assembly in June of 2023. Delegates selected by their own congregations will then take the first vote on whether or not to accept any proposed changes to Article 2. If the proposed changes receive a simple majority vote, a final vote will be held at the 2024 General Assembly. Final approval requires a 2/3 majority. There are, by the way, 3 different ways to amend the UUA bylaws, depending on whether it's a C bylaw in Article 2, a C bylaw that's not in Article 2, or a non-C bylaw. C refers to the pieces that were adopted when the Unitarians and Universalists merged, and they reflect the things that neither side wanted to let go of. There's another whole project revising the rest of the bylaws. As you can see, when you get into 3 different ways of amending things, you're in deep trouble. So much for us being, progressive and liberal and all that. We're hidebound in our own ways. The last revisions to Article 2 were proposed in 2009, but these changes were not adopted. The last time any significant revisions took place was in 1987, 35 years ago. Now, is 2022 different than 1987? Just a bit. In July of 2020, the UUA Board decided it was time for a serious re-examination of Article 2 and appointed a commission of 6 to undertake this work and to report their recommendations to the board. Part of the revision of the Article 2 was prompted by 2 different things which some of you may be familiar with. One is the so-called 8th principle, which was going to be added to the list of 7 that would commit the UUA to very serious work in eliminating systemic racism and white supremacy culture. The other was a proposed amendment to to the 1st principle. Instead of inherent worth and dignity of every person, we were going to be talking about the inherent worth and dignity of every being. Because these were amendments to Article 2, that triggers the need for a study commission. So that started this whole process off, along with the recognition that 35 years is just too long to have gone without a substantial revision of Article 2. I have the privilege, along with one of our co-moderators, the Reverend Meg Riley, of serving as one of the UUA Board's liaisons to the Commission. As you heard earlier, the Article 2 Study Commission's charge is broad and bold. The charge is broad in that it asks not just for minor edits, but a whole-scale reimagining of Article 2. To quote again from the charge, the Commission is free to revise, replace, or restructure the principles as needed. There is nothing sacred about the number of principles or sources, nor their specific wordings, nor in the way that Article 2 is laid out. We encourage creativity. And let me say that again, because the principles and the purposes and the sources are so locked into those of us who have been around a while that it's easy to think that they're somehow like the 10 Commandments. The Commission is free to revise, replace, or restructure the principles as needed. There is nothing sacred about the number of principles or sources, nor their specific wordings, nor in the way that Article 2 is laid out. We, the board, encourage creativity. So you're going to be hearing some very different language over the next year and a half as the Article 2 Study Commission really does take the whole thing apart and repackage it. The Commission is further directed to be bold. Your UUA board has asked that the Commission come up with language which, again from the charge, will enable our UUA, our member congregations, and our covenanted communities to be a relevant and powerful force for spiritual and moral growth, healing, and justice. Our current principles are rather long and wordy. Most UUs could not recite the 7 principles and 6 sources from memory, although most UUs could name most of the general concepts. The Commission is charged, again, with preparing a statement that is poetic and memorable and uses language that is easily understood. For many people, the children's version of the principles is a lot more accessible than the whole list of things that are in the formal version of Article 2. In addition to the charge from the board, in June of 2021, the General Assembly voted by a nearly 85% margin to reinforce the need for anti-racist, anti-oppression language, asking the Article 2 Commission and the board to ensure proposed changes to Article 2 include in the principles, maybe not principles, but somewhere, clear and direct statement that accountable, systemic, anti-racist, and anti-oppressive actions to build a beloved community are part of what it means to be a Unitarian Universalist. This direction reflects an understanding that the UUA itself needs to be self-reflective in understanding how we may unconsciously perpetuate practices that are not welcoming to all groups of people. Consistent with its directive to think beyond the current structure of Article 2, the Commission is avoiding the use of the word principles and sources in favor of values and inspirations. Our UU principles are indeed values to live by and not factual statements to be believed or rejected. So that we can be free to think beyond our current language, I have intentionally not included the language of the current principles and sources as part of this service. The tempting thing would have been to start off by sharing all of that, but I wanted to really start to get all of you to think about what it might be, not what it has been. And as you heard from Reverend Laura, the UUA board has named love as a core theological value. And side note, for me, theology includes atheism. What makes love so central to Unitarian Universalism? Love has been an important part of our Unitarian and Universalist theology for centuries. Love was central to our Universalist tradition, which taught that a loving God would not condemn anyone to eternal damnation, and urged its followers to follow Jesus' teachings about loving others. And our Unitarian side, which is traditionally thought of as being the more intellectual, the Reverend William Ellery Channing, founder of American Unitarianism, stated that faith is love taking the form of aspiration, and love is the life of the soul. In addition to its historical importance, the board observed that while love is mentioned many times in our hymns and readings and is reported to be a core value by many UUs, it only receives a passing mention in one of our 6 sources. The board felt it was vital that Article 2 Study Commission be clearly directed to make love a core part of its work. Love asks that we see another's humanity. In our congregations, love moves us to care for one another in difficult times. Listening as someone shares their pain, baking that casserole or batch of cookies, picking up the phone, all are acts of love. Love leads us to holy curiosity about what other members of our congregations hold as sacred, taking the time to understand and remaining in relationship even when we disagree. Love not only guides our interpersonal relationships, but leads us to include the larger society as well. When we think of the leadership of Unitarians, Universalists, and Unitarian Universalists in the abolition of slavery or promoting civil rights and equality, we can see that love is at the root. Because we are moved by love for others, we oppose racism, sexism, homophobia, transphobia, ableism, and all forms of oppression. Love cannot accept words or deeds which suggest some groups of people are innately better than others, or that some people should not be accorded full civil and legal rights. Love desires that every person should participate in decisions which impact them, that every person should have the resources they need to live a decent life. Love inspires us to want for others an opportunity for their growth as spiritual and ethical beings. In recent years, our understanding of love has grown to include our planet, not just its people. Love for the other forms of life that share our earth leads us to oppose environmental degradation. Anti-racism, anti-oppression, and multiculturalism are love in action, because when we love, we are willing to make the uncomfortable changes to welcome others who are not like us and to work for justice. Love as a theological value is a far cry from the sentimental picture of love presented by Hollywood, Broadway, romance novels, popular music, or greeting cards. As a theology, love requires us to exert ourselves for the betterment of others and ourselves. In the words of our opening hymn, deeds performed without love are hollow, regardless of how noble they may look on the surface. When we act with love, we have the capacity to do the hard work and to keep doing that work as we strive for justice. Our current sources acknowledge the historical underpinnings of our Unitarian Universalist tradition. Rather than continuing to think historically, the Article 2 Study Commission is asking us to think about what inspires us in the present, while leaving open the possibilities for new inspirations in the future. The problem with the list is that it will necessarily omit something that is important to some group and tends to become outdated as soon as it's written. The Commission is therefore contemplating a broad statement which guides us to be open to the limitless sources that can inspire us. I've referred several times to our covenant. As the Reverend Lisa Ward says so eloquently in our opening reading, a covenant keeps evolving as those who are part of that covenant work to keep it alive and to adapt to changing circumstances. Unlike a creed, which is fairly inflexible, covenants can evolve as our understanding evolves. By grounding ourselves in a covenant rather than a creed, UUs emphasize the importance of relationships and shared truths rather than being bound by hierarchy and a single truth determined for us. The current work of reimagining Article 2 is a good example of a covenantal process. The Commission is engaging UUs through a wide variety of study materials and opportunities for contributing to the reimagining of Article 2. The agreement of thousands of UUs voting at General Assembly will be needed before any changes can be made. In a truly radical step, the Commission is also contemplating a recommendation that our covenant be removed from its current place in Article 2 in the bylaws. Organizational bylaws are legal documents whose elements are often prescribed by state law. Our covenant is a religious statement, providing the basis for how we will be together. Does such an important theological statement belong in a legal document, or should it have its own special place? Perhaps in a preamble, maybe an entirely separate document. True to our commitment to the democratic process, the Article 2 Study Commission welcomes the participation of each of you. The Commission is sponsoring a survey that asks about shared values, inspirations, purposes, and covenant. Anyone is welcome to fill out this survey, which is open until the end of the month. The responses will be analyzed to develop common themes, and based on that data and on interviews with various UU identity and professional groups, the Commission will draft a variety of ideas that might be included in a new Article 2. Some of these ideas might be different from one another to stimulate reflection and discussion. These ideas will be shared just before GA so that they can be discussed by congregations and so that your delegates will reflect your opinions when they provide feedback on these at General Assembly. And over the summer, the Commission will start to develop its near-to-final proposals. In the fall, there will be further opportunities for UUs to comment on that draft, and after further revisions, the Commission will present its recommendations to the UUA Board in January of 2023. And then there will be more opportunities for feedback during the late winter and the spring. More revisions are likely to be made, and the final proposal will be presented for a vote at General Assembly in June of 2023. The Article 2 Study Commission has conducted several panel discussions on covenant and purpose, and Reverend Laura and I have scheduled the 3 opportunities you saw in the earlier announcements to go by Zoom, watch portions of those panel discussions, and then have a discussion. They've been excellent so far. The first of our sessions will take place on this coming Thursday evening, April 14th. The Article 2 Study Commission will sponsor a panel discussion on inspirations on Friday evening, April 15th. So get your taxes done so you can enjoy the conversation. I think we maybe have just a couple of minutes, so let me take one of the survey questions. There are a lot of questions, and knowing how wordy you like to get, the commission is saying, how about picking 2 or 3 words? Horrors. When we speak of UU values, what are the values you think Unitarian Universalists share? And we'll maybe take a couple here and a couple online. And again, just 1 to 3 words. What are the values you think Unitarian Universalists share? Open-mindedness. Compassion. Respect. How about from online? Any others?
Love.
Love. What's that? Tolerance. Okay, another question, and I'll leave you to think about this one because we've got a few more things to do. As you go throughout the week, just consider, if we think of the UUA's ministry, now we're talking about the whole Association of Congregations, if you think of our ministry as living our values, what do you think our UUA ministry is in the world today? Big question. Well, that's just a brief taste of the survey, and your contributions to this effort are really very welcome. And please participate as you are able. There's a lot of material. If you go to the UUA's website and in the search box, type in Article 2 Study Commission, it will bring you to their page. And there is just videos, there are interviews, there are all kinds of small group study guides, everything you ever wanted to know about the principles and the purposes and what you might want to think about. And we're probably afraid to ask, and you can easily get lost if you're like me and go down rabbit holes on the internet pretty quickly. The Commission also has a Facebook page for those of you who are on Facebook, and that's a good way to keep on top of what the Commission is up to. The work of the Article 2 Study Commission has the potential to change our UUA and give it the life it needs to move into the middle of the 21st century. If the new statement of values, inspiration, and purpose deliver what the board has asked, the UUA will be transformed. We have the potential for the UUA to be a powerful force for the good of individuals and of our societies. And if we each live into this new covenant, we as individuals will also be transformed. May it be so, and blessed be.